All righty. Okay, thank you everybody for attending today's meeting with Graver. Chris LeMay, who's their product and applications manager, we've been talking for and walking through the product lines and different applications that we may be maybe overlooking at some of our facilities and just try to raise awareness and also talk about some upcoming training that we're going to be doing. Graver did a really great job working with us when we first started building up our product knowledge training and focused on specific applications. So whether it was microelectronics or food and beverage, chemical, general industrial, we're going to refresh those and get those back out to everybody. We're not going to hold a live session for that. We'll just record it and make it available in Saba, and I will provide some updates to you guys when that's available. But I recommend everybody check that out because I think instead of it just being more of a high level training, it is going to do a really good job of walking through where the true opportunities are. So Chris, thank you very much for working with us to put this together. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you.
Okay. Thanks, Jason. As Jason said, my name is Chris LeMay. I'm the product manager for Graver Technologies. So I'm responsible for the kind of the technical aspects of the product line and the technical support for the team. As well as some of the training that's done. So I put together a good bit of training for us corporately. Really what the purpose of today was to give you a broad overview into Graver Technologies. So ideally out of today, you'd be able to walk away with the answers to who Graver is. Quite often we get questions of, I think I've heard Graver, but who are they exactly? So part of what I want to do today is give you a little bit of a background so that you can create a 30-second, 1-minute elevator pitch of who Graver is. I want you to understand what we do, specifically what the segment that you work with. Graver's broader than what we're going to show you. You guys focus specifically with the liquid filter group within Graver, which is one of 7 technology groups within Graver. So there's obviously another 6 technologies that we're not going to be talking about. And then finally want to give you some idea of, okay, now I know who Graver is. I know kind of some of the characters of the product. Where should I be looking for this stuff? So real high level, maybe not 1,000 foot, but, at least 500 feet level. So there's a lot more detail, and in the coming period of time, we'll put together some of those training presentations to fill in those details. So Berkshire Hathaway, how does this fit in? Well, we're a part of a company called Marmon. Marmon is a company that was purchased by Berkshire Hathaway a number of years ago. Warren Buffett knew the founders of Marmon from, all these, I guess, wealthy guys from days long ago. But Marmon started back in the late 50s. Warren Buffett knew the founders, which those of you in the upper Midwest may recognize the Pritzker family. The same, governor of Illinois, I guess, same family. So those are the folks that had Marmon, and Warren Buffett bought that company. So part of our pitch on this, we like to present this because it shows that we're well-financed, extremely well-managed. Warren Buffett doesn't typically buy poorly managed organizations. So we use that Berkshire Hathaway connection as a tool to establish credibility for Graver. So Marmon itself, we just learned the other day, Marmon hit 9.5 billion. So Marmon is a rather sizable business entity. And Marmon's divided into 11 different sectors. So they take all of their business units, group them together. In some cases, there's 4 or 5 business units. In other cases, there's 20 business units. Some of the names that you might recognize, if you look at the rail and leasing down on the bottom row, Union Tank Car. If you're stuck at a railroad track and you're sitting there, you're counting the cars, you'll quite often see Union Tank Car. So that is a Marmon company. If you go into Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever your home type store is, you buy a pair of gloves, Wells Lamont. Wells Lamont is another example of a Marmon company. So it may not be a well-recognized name, but the brands that it owns are generally well-recognized in the marketplace, or at least in the market sector that it serves. In the lower right-hand corner, Water Technologies, you see a picture of filters. That's who and what we are. We're part of the Marmon Technologies, Water Technologies sector. If you do anything in filtration, you may recognize KX Technologies. KX Technologies is kind of the innovator of carbon block. Filtrex was a company that we bought that also does carbon block. So we are obviously Marmon Water is pretty notable in carbon block technology. Echo Water, one of the biggest manufacturers of water softening equipment in the world. You may not always recognize the name, but they do a lot of private branding for all these companies, including folks like Home Depot, their water softener systems. And then, Graver Technologies down towards the bottom of that list. We fit within the sector. This sector is of the Marmon business is probably about $700, maybe $800 million of the total $9.5 billion in business. So who is Graver? Well, we are an industrial filtration, purification, and separation company. So we make technologies to filter or to otherwise purify or separate materials. We have carbon-based products for food and beverage industry. We have another absorbent technology used to remove lead, heavy metals, arsenic. We do ion exchange at one of our plants. We do air and gas filtration in our New York facility. And in Delaware is where we produce our cartridges. That's the primary business that you folks are invested in with us. So just wanted to give you an overview to throw a couple names out at you so that you understand, for those of you who are newer and may not have worked with us for a long time, these are the folks within the liquid filter business. On the line is Jack. Jack's the director of sales, and he has his crew of support people. So inside sales, if you interact inside with us inside, you're going to talk to either Phil or Leslie, or up in New York, Stacy. We have 4 regional managers in the U.S. Ron does the kind of the Midwest, upper Midwest. Simato does the western part of the U.S. Jim Smith does the Northeast down to Philadelphia, over towards Pennsylvania, into Pennsylvania. And then George Fuller does the Southeast. So he's got the Virginias over into Texas, that whole part of the world. We also have a guy based in Asia and another guy based in Europe. Again, my role in here is product applications. I'm, kind of a technical resource. Generally, you approach your appropriate regional manager first. In their absence, I'm available to support you as well. So one of the best support mechanisms that we have, if you can't reach us, is just reach out to us. So reaching out to us, www.gravertech.com. That's our website. On that website, you will find under the download center. So if you look at that picture, kind of a little left of center is the download center. On there, you can find any published piece of literature that we have available. So if you can't find us, you can easily pull down a piece of literature from there. If you're kind of stymied as to what should I be selling or what should fit, well, we've divided our world of filtration and purification, everything we do, we've divided that into our key market segments. So if you're calling on beer, wine, or bottled water, look in the food and beverage section, and you'll find application detail and recommendations. If you're calling on a microelectronics company, that's obviously, microelectronics tab. Healthcare would be pharmaceutical, vet pharmaceuticals, even nutraceutical type products. So if you know your application, you can find the detail. If you're just looking for a piece of literature, it's under the download section. And I'll point you to the rightmost part of the page in the middle. You'll see distributor login. Clicking on that, you can register. It gives you an extra access to an extra section of the website, which includes things like drawings for housings, the price list. The current price list is always kept on there. Generic certs of compliance. So again, if you can't get a hold of us, as I said, you can reach out into the website and you can gather most of the information you need pretty easily. So a good resource for you that, a very simple way of interacting with Graver.
Chris, can you get detailed specification sheets and test reports out there, or is it just pretty generic?
Most everything is generic. We haven't put, for instance, we get some life and efficiency tests and things like that. That's not, put into those files. Because some of those things require some interpretation, and you grab that piece of document and you could misinterpret that. So we keep some of those internal so that we can manage that flow of information correctly.
Thank you.
But as I said, if you need a cert of compliance that's not specific, it's there. If you're looking for a drawing for a 3-round housing, if we've done it, it's there on that page. As I said, all the current price book is always supposed to be kept there. It's my responsibility, so sometimes I'm a little slow. All right, so that's the who we are part. Let's talk about what we are. Specifically what the liquid process filter group is. We call it LPF. What I want to talk about is what I call 3 manufacturing platforms. So we have 3 key technology manufacturing processes, and we've tried to group our products. I've grouped our products into those 3 key areas called depth filters, pleated filters, and membrane filters. So I'll do a very high level look at each of those technologies and some of the filters that fit in there. Again, website's a great place to look, and some of this we'll fill in with later training. So what's a depth filter? Well, we've all seen a depth filter. I'm sure if you go into, again, Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever type of place you have,
Mr. Grover on
plumbing
here
section, you'll see these fuzzy looking,
okay.
non-pleated filters.
You know what we're doing.
Those are what we would call
both
depth
food
filters.
and various sources, condensate,
If you've
liquid,
been selling for a while,
interior to
you
the
may
product.
recognize names
This
like
of trash
Hytrax
cooling
and
involved. There still has
Profile
sterol
and
here.
Nexus.
Media is
Those are
hydrophobic.
what we would all
So if I
call
fill this up
depth
with
filters.
water and places where you might,
So the
and
technology
making sure
was
that they have
originally
the
developed in the
sterilizing
70s by a
grade
company
number.
called
Sterile air,
Herxonides.
and
The history of that goes that Herxonides sold that off. The product name at the time was Hytrax. So if you run into Hytrax, that's the original depth filter kind of in the market. There are a variety of different depth filters. String wound filters are depth filters, examples of a depth filter. Resin bonded is an example of a depth filter. Specifically, what we want to talk about is melt blown depth filters. So melt blowing is actually a process. So it's the process of taking a pelletized resin, in our case, polypropylene. There is some nylon, there is some polyester. Taking polypropylene in a pellet form, melting it, extruding it through a die, and creating a very fine fiber. That fiber is then sprayed onto a core or a spinning mandrel and collected it's formed typically through some level of compression until you end up with a 2.5-inch diameter filter. The original technology was using one extruder, and what they would do is they would compress very tightly at the core and less as it went out. So you'll see the term graded density. And what that means is the filter becomes more dense at the core, less dense as it goes out. The idea that it's more open on the outside and tighter on the inside. So you get the advantage of that graded density to improve capacity. The worked great in the original design. Later designs starting in the very late 80s through the 90s and onward, folks began looking at that compression because compression has negative effects. Compression decreases the space, so it restricts flow, it restricts capacity. So folks began doing multi-zoned, and the way you do that is you have now multiple extruders. So about 10, 12 years ago, we developed a 4-zoned filter. It has 4 different extruders. Each extruder puts out a different fiber size. The smaller the fiber, the smaller the space, the more efficient it is. The bigger the fiber, the bigger the space. So we put our very small fibers at the core, our very large fibers on the outside, and the other 2 zones in between. And what that does is that creates a graded pore structure, not a graded density, because we're not compressing it. But now each zone has a slightly different fiber size, a slightly different pore size, so to speak. And so now you have sort of a filter within a filter within a filter. So each layer kind of acts as a pre-filter to the subsequent layer. So by not compressing it, what you do is you allow that open space, you get better flow characteristics, and you get better capacity characteristics. So that's the purpose of the multi-zone. That's the value of the multi-zone filter. And that is our core technology for all of our melt blowns. We offer 4 different melt blown products. So from right to left, you see the price points, 302, 377, 676. So we have filters that run from $3 a 10-inch to $20 a 10-inch. Why? Well, each filter has slightly different characteristics. So if you look at the first one, Stratum A, notice the efficiency, 99.9. That's an extremely high efficiency filter, particularly a high efficiency melt blown filter. Very few of those in the market. We talk about the Cactus core. It's on a molded core, very rigid structure, gives it great forward pressure values. When we were doing the testing, for instance, we found that we couldn't crush the filter core at greater than 150 PSID. So that strong core gives the filter a lot of structure. We use, you'll notice, 4 zones throughout all the filters. That's our basic technology. So now here you have the Stratum A, which is 99.9. This is going to be targeted to your high-end applications. We sell some into microelectronics. We sell it into pharmaceutical. You notice the Stratum C is a nominal. So it's the nominal version of the Stratum A. Notice see now it's 90%. And with that reduced efficiency, we now look at the price point down at $6.76. So you're paying for that high performance retention. So if you don't need that high level of retention, you can use a lower cost product. It's 90% is still a very effective filter, still deemed to be a high performance type product. Again, targeted into that pharmaceutical, into the microelectronics or higher end food and beverage types of applications. A lot of the filters that you're going to run into the market, particularly the Hytrex type or the Chinese melt blown that may be out there in the market, are going to be relatively inexpensive. And those are going to be very nominally rated filters. In fact, you see for R2, CMBF, MBC, we don't actually give true nominal ratings because it varies a little bit from micron to micron. When you look at Stratum A, The 1 micron is 99.9. When you look at the 5 micron, it's 99.9. What you tend to see in the nominal melt blown is it varies a little bit. Each micron may be, 82, 78, whatever those numbers may be. So generally they're not rated. You could say roughly they're 80% or so on average. But they are intended to be low cost. These are going to probably be the most prevalent melt blowns that you're going to run into. So you'll find more of these than you find the higher end melt blowns. The difference between the two, notice one says crystal core, one says cactus core. So one has that rigid heavyweight core. The other has a lighter weight core that we form in our process, which allows it to be a little less expensive to produce and allows us to sell it for a little less. So the MVC, I kind of use that type of product in a nominal application where you have things like higher pressures, higher viscosities. When you're into a typical water application, particularly like municipal water, pre-RO, generally you're going to find those are going to be more of the CMBF type of product line. So the all-purpose economy product.
Hey, Chris, we've got a wide range of people who have liquid experience. So when you talk about absolute and nominal, and the customer may not know what they're looking for, what are some key core questions that should be asked to determine whether they really want absolute or they want nominal? Because of the price differential, price shouldn't be the reason, right? They should want the filter for what they need to filter and what their desired end result is. So what are those core questions that you would ask?
Well, certainly folks should want the filter for what it does. Unfortunately, most folks don't truly understand. What I find, a lot of folks don't understand what they're actually doing. So sometimes we have to tease that out a little bit. What I typically look for and ask when I'm, going into these types of things is trying to understand not what filter they're using necessarily, but what are they trying to claim? So if someone says, well, I want to remove all particles at 1 micron, that's going to probably take you away from the very nominal filters, okay? Because the very nominal filters are only about 80% or so at 1 micron. So if they're trying to get very high efficiency at 1 micron, then they're going to need the higher performance filters. The other thing to understand is what are they really doing here? So part of that is who are they selling into? If it's a pharmaceutical company, you probably don't start with CMBF and MVC. You're going to present the stratum A and the stratum C because that's going to be the most probable type of product that they should be using. And then, really understanding what this is doing in terms of, is it a pre-filter to a membrane filter? Is it a pre-filter to just another pleated filter? So understanding that process, because you generally wouldn't put this as a pre-filter to a membrane filter, for instance. You're going to want to put a pleated. So understanding part of that process is an important aspect of choosing whether this, not only which one of these should use.
Give everybody just a
but whether
couple
you
more
should be
seconds
using
to
this
kind of roll
technology
in
at all.
here.
Thank you.
So platform 1, depth filters. Platform 2, pleated filters. So as the name implies, it's pleated. So what we're doing now is we're taking flat sheet media. So this is going to be microfiber media. It's going to be a fibrous media. If you look at it under a microscope, you're going to see fibers to this thing. It's going to be flat sheet. It's going to be about the thickness of a page of paper. It's going to be porous. Typically we work in glass, typically we work in polypro, but we do offer glass products as well. You will sometimes find polyester, cellulose. Those are the kind of the 4 main materials that you're going to run into in the marketplace. Again, we focus primarily in polypro with a little bit of glass. We don't do currently polyester nor cellulose-based products. We compete against them, and we can effectively compete against them in most applications. So what we're doing now is we're taking this flat sheet material, it can be up to 40 inches wide. We run it through a mechanical pleater. We create pleats that are 0.5 to 0.6 inches high. We take the cut out the number of pleats that we want. Can be anywhere from 20 to 60 or 80, sometimes as many as 100. We take those two edges and we run them through our bonding process, either thermal or ultrasonic, and we seal those edges together. So now we have a sealed edge tube. We put in a center core. The center core gives you the forward pressure strength. Put in outer cage, which gives you some reverse pressure strength, as well as protects the outside of the media. And then we can add a variety of fittings to fit all the different configuration of housings that are in the marketplace. The advantage, of course, of pleated filters, as you can kind of guess, is surface area. If you calculate the surface area of a non-pleated filter, that's 2.5 inches, you get somewhere around 0.6 square feet. Well, in a 10-inch filter pleated, we can get anywhere from 2.5 to as much as 7+ square feet. So when you put in that higher surface area, typically that translates to better flow rates, better dirt capacities. And of course, with that goes a higher cost. These medias tend to be more efficient. So when you're looking for those extreme efficiencies, we look at a melt blown filter, and we talk about 90 and 99. Well, now we can start talking about 99.9, 99.98% efficient. So when you're looking for those ultra high efficiency types of filters, you're going to achieve that with a pleated technology. This gets you down as low as 0.2 micron at 99.98. So we have a lot of different pleated filters. We have alphabet soup, as we like to say. So QMA, PMA, QMC, PMC, et cetera. The list goes on. Why in the world do we have so many? There's a lot of pleated technologies or a lot of pleated variants in the marketplace. And each of our filters has characteristics to compete against the different variants that are out there. Give you a couple examples, QMA and PMA. So QMA is our top-end product. It's the most expensive pleated polypropylene that we put out into the marketplace. Our highest performance has over 7 square feet of surface area, the highest flow rates that you're going to get in our pleated filter line. The PMA uses the same media, except now it's 5.4 square feet. So now you have the same media, the same efficiencies, but you have different surface areas. So one you would sell into maybe a pharmaceutical account that's running on a continuous basis. The other you might sell into the same pharmaceutical account, but they're running on a batch basis. So you have different filter characteristics to try to match what the application requires. You look at a PMA and a PMC. The PMA and the PMC have the same surface area, but one is 99.98% efficient and one is 90% efficient. So now you have two pleated polys, different efficiencies, depending on what the customer is trying to do, what filter they're protecting or what they're trying to achieve in their process. A product like QXL has only 2.4 square feet of surface area, but it has as many as 6 different layers in it to give you a lot of depth. So a filter like that is good for gel filtration. So where you need depth to achieve removal of deformable particles. So each filter has a different set of characteristics to it. QSL, for instance, has a layer of polypropylene, but it also has a layer of PES membrane. So this is a serial layered filter that acts as an excellent pre-filter to membrane filters in the beverage market. Okay. You look at the G series products, those are all glass. So we have different glass products. GFC is built with polypropylene components. GFP is built with polyester components. GSS is actually using the same glass media that's in those two products, but now it has metal components, right? So the same media, different structural components to allow you to compete against all the various iterations of products that are in the marketplace.
Chris, can you talk a little bit about surface area and correlation to flow rate and micron capture?
Well, that's a whole lesson in itself, but obviously we
High
would
level.
yeah, obviously the more surface area you have, you can almost always, not always, but almost always anticipate higher dirt capacity. That's because number one, it has just a lot of area. So the more area you have, the more space you have to capture dirt. That also corresponds to flow. So the QMA, for instance, which is 7+ square feet, has better flow characteristics than the PMA, which is 5.4 square feet. So area, capacity, capacity and flow is going to be highly related to the surface area. The other feature is what we know, and where we start to get a little more technical, is if at the same flow, a QMA and a PMA, even though they're rated the same, would one work better than the other? We could argue, yes, the QMA could potentially work better, because now we start talking about flux, flow per unit area. So the more area you have, the slower the flow, potentially the better you are able to capture particles. So that's where we start to get a little more technical. But, one way to improve efficiency is to actually throw a little more area at it, as well as go tighter. Was there a second part to that, Jeff? I can't remember. Short memory as I get old.
No, that was good. I think you covered it at a high enough level without going into a whole training of itself.
Yeah, I have to be careful. Sometimes I get carried away with detail. So the other piece that you need to understand when you go into pleated cartridge, even depth filters to some extent, is there's a lot of different configurations out there. In the industry, you're going to find 10-inch, 20-inch, 30-inch, 40-inch cartridges. So everybody's producing that. But then they start producing all these different fittings, what we call DOE, double open-ended, or SOE, single open-ended. And you could ask, why are there so many different configurations? Believe it or not, pleated cartridges didn't really come into existence. It's intuitive now, but didn't really come into existence until the 70s, give or take. At that time, every manufacturer created their own configuration. So Paul had their own, Millipore had their own, Sartorius had their own. So everybody created their own configuration, patented those configurations. So if you bought a housing from a particular manufacturer, you were more or less locked into that manufacturer's cartridges. Once those patents all expired, everybody started making everybody's configuration. So today you see, there's 10, 12, there's 12 highlighted here. There's actually some other odd ones out there, and Europe has a couple of additional odd configurations in the market. Most often you're going to see what's called just a standard DOE, a gasket on each end, what we call our P configuration. Those tend to be more industrial. We try to keep those, because you're having to seal on two ends, we try to keep those to the more industrial applications, or the applications 1 micron and above. Your higher end applications, your more critical applications, are going to involve a single open-ended cartridge. Typically the P3, P8, P2, P7. Those are our designations, but you see 222, 226. Those are O-ring sizes, standard O-rings. You can go to a standard O-ring book, look up a 222 O-ring, and that's what we put on that. So it's not unique. It's a
Give
standard.
everybody just a couple
commercially
more seconds.
available
Plants,
O-ring.
gas separation, nitrogen
Two major
production,
sizes, 222 and 226.
water treatment, fish farming,
And then you can
the
have
control
either a flat
scroll
end,
that air oils
or
power,
a
the
fin,
dual tower,
on
the
the end.
EPA.
So between
And
all those
seemingly
different
you
things,
need
you
to-
can
it's
create
always
multiple
a-
configurations. Melt blown can be sealed directly onto the melt blown cartridge. You can't do that with a pleated cartridge. You actually have to have seals, gaskets. But a melt blown, by the nature of it, you can seal. So you'll see at the bottom left there, NN. That's a DOE, but there's no seals on it. You're going to actually seal into the microfiber, the melt blown material directly. You can also put gaskets on it. You can end cap it, put gaskets on it. And you have these, as I said, a variety of configurations out there. You'll find some of the melt blown that have a spring on the end. That's where it's most common, sometimes an extended core. So we have 95, 98% of the configurations that you're going to run into. We produce those configurations. So shouldn't be anything that you're not going to run into much that we can't offer an alternative. Okay. So the final platform, so melt blown, pleated. Now we talk about membrane filters. And yes, a membrane filter is a pleated filter. It's built exactly like a pleated filter. But the thing I want you to look at is that image on the right-hand side. That is the picture of a membrane, and specifically a polyether sulfone or a PES membrane. And what you're looking at is a cross-section of it. So at the top of the picture is the top of the membrane, and at the bottom is the bottom of the membrane. And what you see is kind of this non-fibrous structure. So it's a polymer structure, very much like a sponge characteristic to it. So it's not fibrous, it's more built like a sponge. There's no holes in it, but it's very porous, much like a sponge. The other feature to notice is that you see a very dense area in the middle. That's what we call the metering pore section of the membrane. This is what we would refer to as an asymmetric membrane. It's asymmetric. It's very open on the top, very tight in the middle, opens back up. So the advantage of an asymmetry is much like that multi-zone concept of a melt blown. You get this open space at the top, captures the large particles, and goes tighter as it gets to the middle. So these are synthetic materials. This is PES. You will run into competitive products that are nylon, material called PVDF. There's also polysulfone in the market. We compete against all of those with this membrane. You don't have to go after these applications with the same membrane type. In other words, we compete with PES against nylon in a beverage application. We compete against with PES against PVDF in a pharmaceutical application. So we classify membranes in the market now as hydrophilic or hydrophobic.
Stuff like that. I got your email back on the 14th saying that he's no longer with you guys.
Somebody's got
so
to
I'm
mute
curious
there.
as to if you are our main point of contact or if there's someone else I need to be going through.
So hydrophilic, hydrophobic, hydrophilic water, loving, philic loving, hydro water. So these are membranes that easily wet out with water. Now, instead of having different surface areas and, different types of efficiency claims, you'll notice we don't talk about efficiency when we look at membranes. We make the assumption that they're absolute, greater than 99.98. Now we start talking about market characteristics. So ZTech WB. WB stands for wine, beer, bottled water. That's our food and beverage grade. So when you're selling into a food and beverage market, you're going to be selling ZTech WB into those applications. If you were selling into an electronics, a microelectronics company, we have an E-grade product, electronics grade product. Uses the same membranes. The difference is what we do after the fact. Because microelectronics is the ultra pure types of applications, they require a lot of a very high level of removal of impurities, metals, other extractables. So we rinse those cartridges to a high degree to remove any extractables or manufacturing debris that could be present. So selecting the market appropriate membrane is what you're going to be doing here. You're not selling surface area, batch mode. Now it's based on what market are you selling into. So PES has characteristics make it very favorable. It's the last membrane that was truly developed at the commercial level. What you see is from a porosity standpoint, it's the most porous of the membranes in the market, nylon, PVDF. It's the most porous. So it has some of the best capacity and flow characteristics of any membrane in the marketplace. We also worked with another one. I mentioned hydrophobic, hydrophilic. Well, this is our hydrophobic membrane, phobic fearing, hydro water, water fearing. These do not wet out with water. So these are going to be membranes that you use in air and gas applications. It uses PTFE, which, folks will more likely recognize as Teflon. Teflon is a registered trademark of DuPont. So we don't say it's, we say it's a Teflon membrane, but technically it's a PTFE membrane, polytetrafluoroethylene. There's an E on the front, means it's expanded. So you take Teflon and you stretch it bidirectionally, and you create this fibrous looking structure that you see on the right hand side. Spider bodies with webs is what it looks like. But anyway, as PTFE, it has the ability to, very difficult to wet out, very important factor in air applications, and it's also extremely chemically durable. So you use these in the most chemically aggressive applications. Again, we grade this by the market, or now a little bit by the application. You have the TEFTAC, which is kind of the general grade chemical. V, which is a venting grade for food and beverage. P, generally anytime you see P on the end of a product means it's pharmaceutical. And then we have a product that we call Citadel, which is an all fluoropolymer. So it has a ePTFE membrane, but instead of poly components, we now use PFA, fluoropolymer components. So a filter like Citadel, in the neighborhood about $1,300 per 10 inch. So it's a very high-end, high-performance product targeted mostly to the microelectronics industry, chip manufacturing.
Hey, Chris, again, there's a wide variety of people here. Some people are going to say this is a dumb question, but can you explain to people about venting? Because I think that people will walk past a venting application and why that's absolutely critical in the food and beverage, pharmaceutical applications.
Yeah. Venting. When you're into an application, when you're into a plant and you're looking at the top of a storage vessel, a storage tank, be it they've got wine in there, beer, water, even final product in a pharmaceutical. Typically in that tank, you're going to want a vent filter of some type. Anywhere where you have to worry about microbial contamination or particle contamination. Every time you open that valve to that tank, there has to be a displacement of air. So if you're opening that tank, liquid's moving, air has to come into that tank. So if air's coming into that tank and it's not filtered, you're going to be introducing into your potentially high purity solution, you're going to be introducing any particle debris that's in the air or any microbial life that could be in the air, be it mold spores, any bacteria, fungus, anything that could be floating in the air could be introduced in the tank. So in those critical applications where there's storage, high purity applications, high purity water applications, they should have a vent filter on top of those tanks to prevent contamination, particle contamination or microbial contamination. If those are introduced, microbial contamination gets into a tank, it ends up downstream, spoils the final product. So very important part, often overlooked.
Easy application, big dollars, and absolutely critical.
Yeah. Yeah, and you always want to use PTFE in these applications. PTFE doesn't wet with water. So if you accidentally put in a polypropylene, or they push you to put in a polypropylene type filter or a glass filter, they're asking for trouble, because if that filter gets wet, it no longer flows air. So a wet filter will not allow air to flow. So if you're venting, you open up that vent, or you open up that valve to drain the tank, filter doesn't allow air in, that tank is going to collapse. So very important to use PTFE in those types of applications. We also, I'll just mention, what we call specialty products. These are things that don't quite fit in our manufacturing platform concept.
Hey,
We do
Chris,
have a couple of other filters that you'll find in the marketplace, metal filters. We call it the TPE line. It's a porous sintered metal. Take metal powder, heat it up. It melts together, sinters, and creates a porous structure. These are good where you have aggressive chemicals, high pressure, high temperature, things where polymeric filters don't hold up. Also very well suited for backwash applications. For instance, where you're trying to capture hard particles, precious metals, and you want to back pulse the filter to get it off. You capture it on the outside, back pulse it off, easy to collect. So these are good surface type filters for that. The other one is the resin bonded filter, what we call Artec G. A lot of demand for this product, not because of the demand from the applications, but what's happened over the past few years is most manufacturers have gotten out of this business. So supply has really tightened up. So you will run into folks desperately seeking resin bonded filters. Very industrial product, but it tends to be used in viscous fluids, adhesives, low-end paints I've seen it into. This isn't the type of filter you're going to use into a high purity water application. So it's going to be your very industrial types of applications. And of course, housings. We both source and manufacture housings. Our facility in New York is an ASME code shop, one of the oldest, if not the oldest in the country. So we do manufacture vessels up there. We also source some vessels. In this case, there's 3 that I'm highlighting, which is the GSC, what we call the G series housings, SC single cartridge. So these are your single cartridge housings. The GLP is your general purpose industrial housing that holds multiple cartridges. And the GHP is your high purity version of that, holds single and multiple cartridges, but meets the standards that are suitable for the beverage industry, what they call the 3A sanitary standards, as well as those for the pharmaceutical. So if you're going into the pharmaceutical account, you're going to take in the GHP. GLP, you take into an industrial account, maybe a food and beverage account. So it's targeted much like a lot of other products, very market specific types of things. So there's the technologies. That's what we have. Again, high level. But where are you going to find this stuff? And odds are every account that you're calling on, or most accounts that you're calling on, if you're calling in the food and beverage, pharmaceutical market, biotech, healthcare types of applications, filters are there. So you might be looking at the air filters, but liquid filters are in those processes. Let's talk a little bit about where you're going to find it. Again, no great detail. We'll do this at a later point, but want to give you some things to, food for thought, so to speak. So the targeted applications, where we do well, what we do with our products, where you can find filter products. Bottled water. So 2 types of bottled water in the market. There's spring water and there's purified water. There's a few more in Europe, but those are the main 2 you'll see here. So I have a habit of going to stores and looking to see whether it's purified or spring. Purified water uses an RO. So every purified water application that uses an RO has pre-RO filters. So your pre-RO filter opportunity, which is typically done with melt run. If it's spring water, they can't run it through an RO. They have to run it through a series of filters, possibly ozone, UV, etc. There are quite often filter opportunities there, not just particle filters like a pleated polypropylene pre-filter, but they may very well be running it through a 0.45 membrane filter, something like a Z-Tech WB. So there's lots of opportunities there. Beer and wine. There's a winery in every state in the continental U.S. Some of them are tiny. Most of them are fun to visit. And of course, the microbrewery population has greatly exploded in this country. These are the folks that have opportunities for filters. Yes, Anheuser-Busch and Coors and all these big guys also use filters. but often overlooked are your smaller nano breweries, microbreweries, your smaller wineries. These guys are going to often have the need for membrane filter to filter the product going into the bottles. So that's Z-Tech WB again. Spirits, whiskey, great place to go. In soda, you're going to find pre-RO opportunities. They're not filtering the soda. They may be filtering the syrup, but they're using pre-RO water. So Coke, Pepsi, Cotton Beverage, all of those guys. And then you have a series of other types of applications where filters are used to varying degrees. Sweeteners, plant extracts, oils, flavors, vinegar. Don't forget about the utility, air coming in, water coming in, all of those should be filtered. Last few years, we've seen, you say plant extracts, or maybe you didn't, but plant extracts is kind of was an emerging technology, or still is an emerging technology. One of the most prevalent is extracting from hemp and cannabis. CBD oil and the various derivatives from that. Actually, a lot of filters being used in those processes, and there's a lot of folks out there running around seeking filters because they need the help. They don't know where to look. So just some examples of where to look. If you've got these types of accounts, rest assured there's probably some filtration opportunities in there. Industrial waters. Almost everybody's using water, from the guy that's washing lettuce to package it. He needs to filter his water going into those packages, all the way to the microelectronics company that's making the Intel chip, et cetera. So those are all using high purity water or water. You've got the high purity needs of the microelectronics industry. To a lesser extent, impurity is the healthcare. That's a little disturbing, but that's the truth. The purity standards in the microelectronics market are actually much higher than that in the healthcare industry. And then a big area for us has been the dialysis market. So the companies that are doing these dialysis have water systems, and there's opportunities in those locations. You also have industrial water applications, again, like that guy rinsing the water using the rinse water for salad, for lettuce, tomatoes, whatever it might be. You've got municipal water. We won't quite say that's industrial, but large scale using, and specifically where we look at is where you have desalinization, RO. So those of you like in California, along the Texas coast, Florida, that's where you're going to find those big desalinization operations that have ROs that are using a lot of pre-filters. But other industrial water applications that are high volume, things like cooling towers, a lot of operations, manufacturers of all types have cooling towers, water jet cutters, everything from automotive parts to fiber cement siding are cut with water jet cutters. Also injection wells, companies making product that are in turn pumping water or even pumping chemicals down several thousand feet into the ground. Those have to be filtered before so they don't plug the matrix that they're going into. So again, these are all opportunities. I'm sure you're calling on plants like this. There's filtration opportunities sitting there.
Just real quick, Chris, before you get to this one, I just wanted to quickly plug the training that Tom and I have done in the past. Tom Fredericks and I did some training on cooling tower opportunities and walk through the whole application. So if you're not comfortable with that application yet, that's definitely out there to help you out. I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. So,
and if you go into the website, into the Graver Tech website, you'll find a number of case studies, application briefs that are on the website, and those highlight the application. There's a good bit of application detail in there. We've got cooling towers, injection wells. There's a number of application pieces that are written that talk about what filters you used and why you filter. So again, the resource sitting on the Graver Tech website for those. And then some targeted applications and industrial types of applications. And we will group a lot of those together, even though they're all different purity levels. But within the healthcare market, and when we talk about healthcare, we talk about everything from cosmetics to vaccines, everything in between. It's obviously easier to sell a cosmetic than it is to sell into a vaccine company. But those folks are all using vent filters. They're using liquid filters. They're using melt blowns all the way to sterilizing grade membrane filters. So lots of opportunity there. APIs or intermediates, active pharmaceutical ingredients or intermediates. These are chemical plants. They're going into the pharmaceutical market, but these are chemical plants using typically pleated polypro. Much easier to get into than the guy doing vaccine production. But don't forget about ophthalmics, contact lenses, contact lens fluids. You've got nutraceuticals that we put in here, those nutritional drinks, the 4-hour energy drinks and Ensure, things like that. So that's what we talk about. Those are all filtered in the process. They put proteins in, and when you put a protein in, you can't heat sterilize it. So you have to come up with another way to sterilize it or manage bacterial growth. So for that reason, there's filtration commonly found. Pulp and paper plants, there's actually a case study written on that as well. Oil and gas, so if you're doing refineries, there's a number of filters in the refinery. We're not real big into that area, but there are several areas where we do have product that works well. Specifically amine sweetening, where they're removing hydrogen sulfide from gas. Tank farm, which is where they store all the different fuels. So opportunities there. Microelectronics, a lot of water. Water is the biggest chemical that these guys use, and it has to be extreme high purity to achieve that. So there's a lot of opportunity for hydrophilic PES membrane, Z-Tech E. But with the advent of the Citadel product, which is that all fluoropolymer, the ePTFE membrane with PFA with fluoropolymer supports, that's a product that is widely used